My name is Shelley Magnuson, and I'm here representing the Alberta Teachers Association. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Dean Cooper, who is the Reeve from the Municipal District of Bighorn, to say a couple of words. Thank you.
Well, my official task is to thank you for coming, but let me welcome you first. As my counterparts from Banff and Canmore did earlier, those two get kibitzing with each other, and it creates a terrible verbal storm. Almost always results in a calamity downstream. So you notice that the weather changed today before I got here. At any rate, I want to introduce you to my MD, and I think we're supposed to have some thing up top here. Yeah, there we are. So the MD of Bighorn is one of Alberta's newest. We got started in January of 1988, and while the rest of Alberta was celebrating the Olympics here, we quietly became an MD to such an extent that some of our residents didn't even notice. Before that, we were an improvement district, and we have a long, long history. So we have 1,400 permanent residents. We had 2,700 square kilometers. I have 19 staff, and I have 43 grizzly bears. I always like to put that into perspective because it helps you understand we're not just rural, we're remote. And the point I want to make with you is the challenge right now in all of Alberta with the MGA, and that affects schools whether you know it or not. I know you're run under a different act, but we're going to be defining what rural is and what urban is and what large urban is, and you better be paying attention and smelling the coffee. If I can go to the next slide, can you get me to the next slide? I haven't got a clicker here. Oh, maybe I do. Okay, this is a recording of the first minutes in the Bow Valley. You can see that they all came in their finery, as you did, because we've been coming to the Bow Valley for conventions and retreats for over 1,000 years that we know of. And there were big, First Nations leaders with many, many tents and hunted many, many buffalo, and they would be the big guys in the center with the fancy headdresses. How do I see myself as a Reeve? Well, the little guy in the circle in the background. I take great pride in describing myself as the little big man from Bighorn. What does a Reeve do? One of my first tasks as Reeve was to go to Atlanta and give a keynote address to people that had come from 78 countries of the world. And I actually didn't know what a Reeve did. So I came back from the conference having been asked what a Reeve is, and I asked my CAO, I said, what does a Reeve do? How can I explain that? And he says, a Reeve does whatever Mrs. Reeve tells him. We had a long discussion over tell and ask, but I realize now, after 44 years of marriage, that I'm eminently qualified for being Reeve. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is what the world sees when they come to the MD of Bighorn. This is what you see when you're looking east down this valley. And it is a transportation corridor in which millions and millions of people come through every year. Some of them stop off, some of them go clean through. But this is 5% of the land in the MD of Bighorn. And that isn't what it always looks like. So if we can go to the next slide. This is what it looked like a year ago, 2 years ago. We had a tremendous disaster here. And I'm hoping I can ask my school board to stand, and any of the teachers in the audience to stand. These are some of my heroes. You see, we were in terrible shape, and the Canadian Army couldn't get to us. That's how bad it was. And we opened the schools up as evacuation centers, and we had to stay there for more than a month because we couldn't get utilities reestablished. Thank God we didn't have anybody hurt. The first accident was a little boy in the bouncy castle that broke his arm. And the second accident was one of my retired military nurses that, having had perhaps one too many wines, slipped. At any rate, you have no idea how thankful I am that as a school board and a municipality we have it together, that we could act in unison in the worst of tragedies for the best of reasons. And I am truly thankful. I want to also thank the rest of you, because Alberta came alongside us, 1,400 people. My annual operational budget is $4 million a year. And I want you to know that I've been spending about one annual budget a month trying to get the dang place back together. So we were hit hard. The reason is everything around here is on a 7-degree slope. So we literally had torpedo trees coming down creeks, taking out whole houses. Some of them I couldn't find the foundations to. So we didn't have anybody killed. I have no explanation for that. But if you can separate the divine from good luck, what does it matter? Nobody was hurt. I want to go on to the next slide, please. And this is what our MD looks like. We are resource-based. And I want you to go home with the idea that rural people pay their way. You came by Exshaw, you probably saw the cranes at the cement plant. That's one of 6 that already exist. So that would be the 7th. That kiln will add $700 million a year to the Alberta economy for the next 50 years. So when you come with your needs for your students in your place, remember that rural people are very, very self-reliant. We know how to contribute, and we know how to be generous, not only supply ourselves, but others. While Alberta is getting a $700 million benefit, the increase in taxes to the MD of Bighorn will be about $250,000 a year. So we get a little benefit, but we do a huge benefit to Alberta. We pay our way. The next one, slide please. Yes, I want to talk a little bit about an experiment at Exshaw. In World War II, a lot of people went to war, and so did the Stoney First Nation. And some of the people that were in those services were killed in action. Some of them returned. All of them returned to a reserve situation that hadn't changed. Well, the rest of Alberta, or the rest of Canada, went to war and said, never again. You have to understand they came back to a situation that allowed residential schools. If you don't know anything about residential schools, you better get going on that one, because it certainly affects the adult population, First Nations population in this province. In 1961-62, things changed. And with that change, there were 5 students that came in 61 to the Exshaw School to be educated off the reserve without having to ask permission to do so every day. And then they were joined by 2 more very brave individuals. They represented males and females. And they began an education experience and an experiment. We had about 200 students in the school at that time. So those were about 3.5% of the population. It took raw guts and courage for those 7 students to begin the experiment. I know one of them really well. It's Gerald Powderface. He describes himself as having thought he was coming to Harvard. Well, I don't know that we ever qualified for Harvard. But those brave students stayed, and they're still at Exshaw. And Gerald's children have gone through that school. His grandchildren have gone through that school. And one of his great-grandchildren is there. So Stoney First Nations are now 90% of the population in the Exshaw School. I don't think we could be blessed with a better gift. And I am grateful to those people that set the way. And I'm going to suggest that we have to learn from those First Nations children, Stoney children, that took a new path, took a different path, risked for themselves, and perhaps unknowingly transcended into the future to something bigger and better. In rural education, we've got to keep thinking, keep working, keep risking, keep doing. We're always going to be learning. Alberta right now is in a recession, and I want to leave you with something that Winston Churchill said. He said during the Second World War, he said, now that we're out of money, we're going to have to use our brains. So thank you for coming to the MD of Bighorn. Can you go to the last slide, please? We are delighted to have you as our guests. We welcome you back and invite you back for your next visit. We hope that you will not only stay, but you will stay longer. Thank you.